My name is Tom and I had everything. Or so I thought. At 38, I had a stable job as a software engineer, a nice house, and a beautiful wife, Lily. We'd been together for 12 years and I loved her deeply. But something was off. At first it was small things. A late night at work here and there, a sudden need to go on a girls' night out more frequently, or the odd change in her mood. I didn't think much of it at first. People change, right? But then the signs started to build up. She was always on her phone, constantly texting, barely ever letting me see what was on her screen. When I asked her about it, she brushed me off, claiming it was just work stuff. But I knew better. I wasn't an idiot. I worked in IT, so I understood how technology worked. I was familiar with tracking systems, digital footprints, and the like. My suspicions grew every day. I wasn't just paranoid, I knew something was wrong. And when you've been married as long as we had, you begin to pick up on things that others might overlook. One day while Lily was in the shower, I made a decision. I knew she used the family computer at night to send emails and chat with friends, but I never really gave it much thought until now. I had to know the truth. I decided to secretly install a keylogger on our home computer. It seemed harmless enough, just a way for me to gather information, nothing more. A little piece of software that would record every keystroke. If she had nothing to hide, I would find nothing. But if she did, well, I would finally have the proof I needed. For the next few weeks, I watched her like a hawk, waiting for her to use the computer again. It didn't take long. When she finally did, I eagerly pulled up the logs. The first few days didn't reveal much. A few emails with friends, some work-related notes. But then I started to see something else. Explicit messages, flirtatious exchanges, and videos. The conversations grew more intimate, the texts more graphic. My heart sank as I scrolled through weeks' worth of evidence. It was all right there in front of me. Lily had been cheating. And the man she was cheating with? A coworker named Derek. I had the proof. Everything I had suspected was true. But now what? What was I supposed to do with this information? Part of me was in shock and another part of me was furious. I didn't know how to feel. All I knew was that my entire life had just been flipped upside down. I spent hours staring at the screen, reading every message, watching every video. The betrayal hurt, but at the same time I couldn't look away. It was like a train wreck I couldn't stop watching. I had caught her and now I had all the power. The next few days after I discovered everything were a blur. I didn't speak to Lily much. I couldn't. Every time I looked at her, I was flooded with a mixture of rage, disappointment, and disbelief. I kept seeing the messages, the videos in my mind. And every time I looked at her, all I could think about was Derek, the man who had taken my place, the man who had touched her when I hadn't even been given the courtesy of knowing. I spent most of my time at work, keeping myself busy, trying to think through everything. The anger inside me kept bubbling to the surface. It was like a fire that couldn't be contained. But I didn't want to confront her just yet. I wasn't ready for that. Instead, I began to plan. I couldn't just let this slide. Lily thought she could get away with it. She thought she could betray me and that I would be none the wiser. But I wasn't going to let her walk away from this without facing the consequences. I thought about confronting her, laying everything out on the table, but that felt too easy. I needed more. I wanted her to understand what she had done to me. I wanted the world to see her for what she was. And then it hit me, what better way to expose her than to do what I did best? I knew how to manipulate the digital world. I knew how to expose people for who they really were. What if I took everything she had done, everything I had uncovered, and made it public? What if I could put it out there for everyone to see? In my rage-fueled state, I didn't think about the consequences. I didn't think about how this would affect me or Lily. All I could think about was the revenge, the power, the satisfaction of seeing her humiliated. I would make her pay and I would do it in the most public way possible. That night, after a few drinks to dull the pain, I got to work. I pulled up the keylogger data, downloaded the videos, and copied the explicit messages she had sent to Derek. It felt like I was building an arsenal, and the more I collected, the more it fueled my desire for revenge. I didn't just want her to be embarrassed. I wanted everyone to know what kind of woman she was. I wanted the people closest to us, the friends, the family, the co-workers, to see her for who she truly was. They all thought she was perfect, the loyal wife, the loving partner. But they didn't know the truth, and I was going to make sure they did. I created a website. A simple, anonymous site where I could post all the evidence. I made it as easy to navigate as possible, each page displaying the damning screenshots, videos, and text messages. It was like I was writing my own version of justice. Then, with a twisted sense of satisfaction, I shared the link. I sent it to everyone in our social circle, our friends, our family, and, of course, the people she worked with. I didn't even care about the fallout. All I cared about was the feeling of control. It was like I had taken back everything she had stolen from me. The fallout was immediate. The messages started coming in almost instantly. My phone blew up with notifications. Friends texting me, family members calling, all of them in disbelief. The web of lies that Lily had built over the years was coming apart at the seams. People were disgusted, shocked, and confused. Some reached out to me offering support. Others just felt awkward, unsure of how to handle it. But there was no turning back now. I had done it. The deed was done. My revenge was out there for the world to see, and Lily's reputation, everything she had worked so hard to build, was in ruins. But as the adrenaline wore off, something else settled in. A feeling I hadn't anticipated. Guilt. The weight of what I had done started to sink in. I had ruined her, yes. But in doing so, I had also ruined myself. The moment I hit send on that email, it was like a switch had been flipped. The chaos began almost immediately. My phone buzzed nonstop as the people I knew started to react to the website I had created. Some of them were angry, some were sympathetic, and others were completely stunned. It felt like everything in my life was unraveling right before my eyes, but I didn't care. I was still numb with the rush of taking control. But then the reality started to set in. This wasn't just about Lily anymore. It wasn't just about her betrayal, it was about me. I had exposed her to the world, and now I had exposed myself too. As the day wore on, my thoughts began to spiral. The website I had created, the link I sent to everyone, it wasn't just about revenge, it was a mark of how far I had fallen. I had spent years building a life with Lily, a life that was now in ruins. But what had I built for myself? I had destroyed the one person I once loved. I had destroyed everything for the sake of an impulsive, drunken decision. When Lily finally called, her voice was trembling, broken, as if she was trying to process the devastation that had just fallen on her. I didn't answer immediately. I just sat there staring at my screen. She was right. The things I had posted, the things I had exposed about her, about us, couldn't be undone. She was humiliated. Her job was on the line. Her friends were disgusted. Her family was disgusted. But what about me? What about me, Lily? I finally said, my voice cold. What about everything you did to me? Don't call me asking for mercy. You had your chance and you blew it. She begged me over and over to take it down. She begged me to meet in person to talk it out. But I didn't want to talk. I wanted her to feel the pain I had felt. I wanted to destroy the facade she had so carefully built around herself. But the more I listened to her, the more I felt the pull of my own guilt. I had crossed a line that I couldn't uncross. What was once a calculated act of revenge was now a tidal wave of regret. I could hear the desperation in her voice, the crack of her voice as she struggled to understand what had happened to our relationship. But I had no answers for her. What did it matter now? What did it matter who was at fault when we both had blood on our hands? For the next few days, my life was consumed by the fallout. Friends stopped texting me. Family members gave me long lectures on respect, on how to handle things like an adult. Some people called me a coward. Some even called me a monster. But there were others who sided with me, telling me they understood why I had done it. They said I was justified. They said I had the right to expose her for what she had done. But the truth was, I wasn't feeling justified anymore. I was feeling empty. I had spent my entire life trying to do what was right, to be the good guy. But now, I wasn't sure I even knew who the good guy was. Lily, of course, tried to reconcile. She reached out again, offering apologies, promises, and excuses. But it was too late. We both knew it. The damage was done. And then the unexpected happened. The phone call that I never thought I'd receive. It was from my boss. Tom, I just wanted to let you know that we've been getting a lot of complaints about you. This thing with your wife, it's become a problem at work. People are talking. There are rumors flying around. The weight of his words hit me like a freight train. It wasn't just my personal life falling apart. It was my career too. The company I had worked for, the colleagues I had spent years with, were now distancing themselves from me. I had become a pariah, someone to avoid. It was as if the entire world had turned its back on me for something I had done in a moment of anger. I stared at the phone screen, feeling my entire life crumble down around me. This wasn't just the end of my marriage. It was the end of my peace, my relationships, and maybe even my future. What had I become? Days turned into weeks, and the weight of my actions settled in like a heavy, unshakable cloud. I had hoped the chaos would subside, that things would go back to normal, but they didn't. The guilt gnawed at me constantly. It wasn't just the shame of what I had done to Lily, it was the realization that I had destroyed my own peace of mind in the process. The first sign of real regret came when I started hearing things about Lily. how her job was at risk, how people had lost respect for her. Some of her friends had cut ties, and her family wasn't speaking to her. I couldn't help but think about the impact I had on her life. I had humiliated her, exposed her to the world in a way that was unforgivable. But I also realized that it wasn't just about her anymore. It was about me. About who I had become. I didn't recognize myself in this mirror of revenge. What was the point of exposing her if it had cost me my own well-being? What did I gain really? I found myself sitting alone at night, scrolling through the website I had created. The evidence, the screenshots, the videos, everything was there, in stark contrast to the life we had built. I could feel the old anger rising again, but it quickly turned into an overwhelming emptiness. The initial high I had gotten from exposing her was long gone. Now all I felt was hollow. Lily hadn't given up though. Despite everything, she continued to reach out. She would call me at all hours, sometimes even sending voice notes, apologizing, asking for another chance. But every time I listened, I couldn't help but feel disgusted with myself. I had no desire to make things right. I didn't know how to. At the same time, I was facing the fallout from my job. I had been called into HR twice to discuss my behavior, to explain what had happened. Rumors about my personal life were now spreading through the office, and the more I tried to brush it off, the worse it got. People started distancing themselves from me, and I was no longer invited to meetings or social events. My reputation had been shattered, and it was my own doing. I thought about calling Lily and asking her to meet, but every time I picked up the phone, I put it down again. I didn't know what I would say. What could I say? What was left to fix? I drank more in those days than I had in years. It was the only way to dull the pain, to avoid facing the mess I had made. But no matter how much I drank, the guilt and regret never went away. They followed me like a shadow, reminding me constantly of what I had lost. One night, I found myself at a bar alone, nursing a glass of whiskey. I was staring at the drink, not really drinking it, just lost in thought, when I felt a tap on my shoulder. I looked up to find Kevin, an old friend from work. He sat down next to me and I could see the concern in his eyes. "Tom, man, I know things have been rough for you, but this isn't you. You've always been better than this. You've got to pull yourself together." I shook my head. "You don't understand, Kev. I ruined everything. Everything I had, it's all gone. My marriage, my career, my peace of mind, all of it." Kevin didn't say anything for a long time. He just sat there watching me until he spoke again. "You need to let it go, man. You can't change what happened, but you can control how you move forward. You don't want to be the guy who keeps holding on to this, the guy who gets consumed by his own anger." I looked at him, trying to process his words. Kevin was right. But how could I let go of something that had consumed me for so long? How could I undo the damage I had caused, not just to Lily but to myself? Time seemed to stretch out endlessly. Each day bled into the next, and I found myself trapped in a cycle of regret, self-pity, and frustration. I would wake up, go through the motions of my daily routine, then return home to an empty house, where I would sit in front of my computer, unable to escape the constant reminder of my actions. The website was still there, still live, still exposing Lily's infidelity. But the anger I had once felt, the drive to seek revenge, was now replaced with the haunting realization of what I had done to myself. Work was unbearable. My colleagues now treated me with distant courtesy, their eyes avoiding mine when I entered the room. I could feel the whispers behind my back, the judgment in their silence. I used to be respected, someone they admired for my expertise in IT, but now I was the joke of the office. People who had once been my friends now looked at me like I was a leper, unsure of how to interact with the man who had destroyed his marriage and made the scandal public. I spent more and more time avoiding work, finding excuses to stay home, to avoid facing the consequences of my actions. But staying home wasn't any better. It only gave me more time to think, more time to beat myself up over the choices I had made. The worst part of it all was that I couldn't take back what I had done. I couldn't reverse the damage I had caused. The emails, the texts, the videos, they were all still there, hanging over me like a storm cloud I couldn't escape. And then came the moment that broke me. Lily reached out again, but this time it wasn't a message or a call. She showed up at my doorstep. I stood frozen in place when I saw her, her face pale, eyes red from crying. She had a look of desperation in her eyes. I didn't know what to say, how to feel, but I opened the door anyway. "Tom?" she started, her voice shaking. "Please just talk to me. I don't know what I was thinking. I was selfish. But you have to understand. I was lonely. I was lost. I never meant to hurt you." I didn't let her finish. "You did hurt me, Lily. You destroyed everything." I could see the tears streaming down her face, but I didn't feel sorry for her. I couldn't. The damage had been done. I'm sorry, Tom. I was wrong. I was completely wrong. I never thought you would do this, expose me like this. But I am begging you, please, take it down. This isn't who we are. This isn't who I am. But I couldn't take it down. The sight, the exposure, it had become a symbol of everything I had done to regain control, to feel like I mattered. And as much as I hated myself for doing it, as much as I wanted to undo it, I couldn't. I couldn't take back the power I had tasted. I can't, I said, my voice cold, distant. What's done is done. I'm sorry, but I'm not going to fix this. You have to live with the consequences. Lily stood there, silent, her face crumpling as the weight of my words sank in. She turned and left, her steps heavy, as if she knew our relationship was truly over. It wasn't just her life that had been destroyed. It was mine too. And the most painful realization hit me hard as I watched her walk away. This wasn't just the end of my marriage. It was the end of me. The man I had been, the man who had made those decisions, was gone. In his place was a shell of someone who couldn't find peace, who couldn't reconcile the person he had been with the person he had become. For the first time since everything started, I felt truly alone. The emptiness I had tried to fill with anger, with revenge, now overwhelmed me in a way I had never imagined. I thought about everything I had lost, the woman I loved, my career, my reputation. But what hurt the most was the realization that, in seeking revenge, I had lost myself. The days following that conversation with Lily were the darkest of my life. The weight of everything I had done, everything I had exposed, everything I had destroyed, pressed down on me like a heavy, suffocating blanket. I was haunted by the image of Lily's tear-streaked face as she walked away from my doorstep. I could hear her voice in my head, begging me to take it down, to fix what I had broken. But I didn't. And I didn't know how to undo the damage anymore. My colleagues continued to treat me with cold indifference, some even outright avoiding me. It wasn't just the betrayal of my wife that had cost me, it was the exposure of it. My professional reputation was in tatters, and all the respect I had built over the years felt like it had been flushed down the drain. Everywhere I went, I could feel the judgment in the air. People whispered behind my back. I saw the looks in the grocery store, at the bar, in the park. It was as if the entire world now knew about my failure, about the man who exposed his wife to the world in the most humiliating way possible. And the worst part? I was just as humiliated. It wasn't just Lily who had been torn apart. It was me too. The fallout from my actions was all-consuming. I couldn't go anywhere without feeling the weight of the choices I had made. I had hurt Lily, yes, but I had hurt myself just as much. Even my family, who had always been supportive, started to pull away. My mother called me one evening, her voice filled with disappointment. "Tom," she said softly, "this is not who you are. I understand your anger, but you can't keep living in it. You've destroyed something that can't be fixed now." I didn't have any words to respond. I couldn't explain myself, not really. What was I supposed to say? That I had acted in rage? That I was trying to take control of a situation where I felt powerless? It didn't matter. The damage was irreversible. I spent the next few weeks in a daze, caught in an endless cycle of self-loathing and regret. I still went to work, but I couldn't focus on anything. The hours dragged on, and I became more and more detached from the world around me. The worst part was that no one really wanted to talk to me. Even the few people who had stood by me at the beginning had started to back off. They couldn't understand what had possessed me to do something so drastic, so public. Then came the next blow. My job was on the line. I was called into HR once again, and this time they didn't beat around the bush. My supervisor, an older man named Bill, sat across from me with a somber expression. "Tom, the company can't tolerate the kind of behavior you've exhibited. The personal nature of your actions has affected the workplace, and it's impacting the overall culture here." I sat there in silence, not knowing what to say. Bill wasn't wrong. My actions had caused a ripple effect that had affected my colleagues, the work environment, and the company's reputation. But the guilt gnawing at me didn't let up. "We need you to understand," Bill continued, his voice firm. "This is a serious issue. We've received complaints, and the fallout from what happened with your wife, it's too much to ignore. You're a talented employee, Tom, but the decision we make here will be based on more than just your skills. It's about character." I nodded, but inside I felt sick. I had ruined everything. My reputation, my career, and my personal life were all falling apart because of one decision. One impulsive act of revenge. Bill handed me a paper. "We'll have to suspend you for a period of time. And after that, we'll review whether your position here is sustainable. I need you to understand the gravity of what's at stake." I left the office that day numb. I couldn't think straight. I didn't know what was worse, losing my job or realizing that I had sacrificed everything for a momentary feeling of control. I had let my emotions dictate my decisions, and now it was costing me everything I held dear. The world around me felt like it was crumbling. Lily wasn't calling anymore. My colleagues didn't care. My family wasn't speaking to me. It was like I had become invisible, trapped in a life of consequences that were too great to escape. The revenge I had sought, had craved, had not brought the satisfaction I had imagined. Instead, it had left me broken, alone, and full of regret. Days stretched into weeks, and I found myself in a haze, floating through life as if I were watching it all from the outside. The job that I had spent years working for was slipping through my fingers. My marriage, the one I thought would last a lifetime, was a distant memory, a painful echo. The website was still live, still circulating, still haunting me. It felt like the world was holding its breath, waiting for me to crack. And I did. Sitting alone one night, I found myself revisiting the website. I don't know why I did it. Maybe it was the alcohol numbing the pain, or maybe it was the desire to relive the chaos that I had set into motion. But as I scrolled through the posts, my words, my actions, I couldn't help but feel disgusted. I had done this. I had put it all out there. I had exposed Lily's most intimate secrets for the world to see, but in doing so, I had exposed my own. The power I thought I had gained through my actions had turned out to be an illusion. It didn't feel like justice. It felt like a grave mistake, one that I would never be able to undo. I started reading the comments. Some were sympathetic. Some were disgusted. But the one comment that hit me the hardest was from someone I didn't even know. Revenge only poisons the soul of the one who seeks it. It was a simple statement, but it cut through me like a knife. It made me realize the truth of what I had done. Revenge had consumed me, and now I was the one paying the price. It wasn't just Lily who had been destroyed, it was me. My reputation, my job, my relationships, all of it had been sacrificed for a moment of vengeance. And now there was nothing left. I tried to tell myself that it was worth it, that she deserved it, that everything she had done to me warranted this destruction. But deep down, I knew I was lying to myself. I had been the one to drag us both down this path. I had been the one to pull the trigger. In that moment, I realized how lost I was. I had given up everything for the sake of feeling powerful, for the sake of proving something to myself and to others. But it hadn't made me feel better. It hadn't brought me the closure I thought I needed. It had just left me hollow, broken, and completely alone. I closed the website, but it was still there, haunting me. I couldn't just delete it. It was a part of me now, a part of the monster I had become. I didn't know what I was supposed to do next. How could I fix this? Could I fix this? Or had I crossed a line from which there was no return? I spent the next few days in a fog. I tried calling Lily again. This time, there was no anger in my voice. Just regret. I wanted to apologize, to take it all back, but I didn't know how. She didn't answer. And part of me was relieved. I woke up every day feeling like a stranger in my own life. There was no longer any clear path forward, no more stability, no more control. Everything I had spent years building, the good reputation, the marriage, the career, was reduced to rubble. And yet, the most painful realization wasn't that I had lost all of that. It was that I had lost myself in the process. The shame weighed heavily on me. The remorse came in waves, crashing against my thoughts, pulling me under like a riptide. I hadn't just destroyed Lily's life, I had destroyed mine as well. But unlike her, I didn't have the luxury of pretending it was someone else's fault. I had done this. I had exposed her, but in doing so, I exposed my own flaws and mistakes. I couldn't stop thinking about the comment on the website. Revenge only poisons the soul of the one who seeks it. Every time I replayed it in my head, it became more and more clear. I had been consumed by a desire for payback, but the bitter truth was that it hadn't healed me. It had just made me colder, more distant. It had created a hole in me that I didn't know how to fill. I couldn't reach out to Lily anymore, not after everything I had done. She had every right to be angry with me, to want nothing to do with me. I had humiliated her in a way that no apology could undo. But as I sat in my empty house, the silence was deafening. What was left? Was there even a way to fix what I had broken? Days passed and nothing seemed to get better. I tried talking to friends, but they too had distanced themselves. Even the ones who had sided with me in the beginning now turned their backs. They didn't understand how something so calculated could go so wrong. They didn't understand that I wasn't seeking justice. I was seeking a hollow victory, one that left me feeling more lost than I had ever felt before. I started drinking more. I stopped caring about work. I barely left the house. But one night, something inside me snapped. I was staring at the empty bottle in front of me, trying to drown the thoughts, when I realized that I couldn't keep living like this. I couldn't keep punishing myself and hiding behind my anger. It wasn't healthy and it wasn't going to fix anything. I needed to stop. I needed to take responsibility for the mess I had made and figure out how to rebuild my life, piece by piece. But where do you start when everything has already fallen apart? When you've already burned the bridges, when you've already exposed your deepest regrets to the world? I sat there for hours thinking about the things I had lost, the things I had destroyed. But then I thought about something else. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way to move forward. Maybe there was a chance for redemption, not for Lily but for myself. The first step, I realized, was to undo what I could. I didn't know how, but I knew that keeping the website live wasn't helping anyone. It wasn't helping me. It wasn't helping Lily. It was only making everything worse. I went to my computer that night, my hands shaking as I opened the website. I hesitated for a moment, then hit the button that deleted everything. The posts, the videos, the evidence, it was all gone. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of something that resembled peace. It wasn't a perfect solution. It didn't fix everything, but it was a start. I knew it wasn't going to be easy. There would be no magic fix to undo the damage I had caused, but it was the first real step I had taken in months. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was breathing again. It's strange how much you can lose in such a short period of time. In the span of a few weeks, I had gone from a man with everything to a man with nothing. I had lost my wife, my friends, my career, and most painfully, my sense of self. I had been so consumed by the desire for revenge that I had forgotten what it felt like to just be a person again. But that night, when I deleted everything, the website, the evidence, the chaos, I finally made the choice to stop punishing myself. It was the first time in a long while that I allowed myself to feel something other than anger and regret. But knowing how to fix what I had broken wasn't simple. There was no magic formula, no quick fix to heal the wreckage of my life. I started with the small things. I stopped drinking every night. I began forcing myself to get out of bed, to get dressed, to go to work. I didn't want to, but I knew I had to. I couldn't afford to let the weight of my past actions keep me paralyzed forever. Work wasn't easy. I still had a reputation to rebuild, and I knew that it wasn't going to be quick or painless. People still talked about me behind my back. Some colleagues gave me cold nods when I passed them, others wouldn't even make eye contact. But some, a small few, began to approach me with tentative words of support. They told me they understood, that I wasn't the man they saw in the tabloids or in the office gossip. That was the first glimmer of hope I had felt in a while. But the real work began at home. I still hadn't spoken to Lily. I didn't expect her to forgive me. I didn't expect anything from her at all. But the longer I lived in this self-imposed isolation, the more I realized that there was no way to heal without facing the damage I had caused her. I called her one night. She didn't pick up, and I wasn't surprised. I left a voicemail, my voice shaking with a mixture of regret and guilt. Lily, I don't know if you'll ever listen to this, but I need you to know that I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything. For what I did to you, to us. I know I can't fix this, and I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted you to hear that I regret everything. I hope you're okay. And I hope one day we can find peace with all of this, whether together or apart. Please take care of yourself. I hung up the phone, staring at the screen as if it would somehow give me the answers I was searching for. The truth was, I didn't know if she would ever forgive me. I didn't know if we would ever be able to speak again. But I had to try. The next few weeks were quiet. Lily didn't respond, but that wasn't unexpected. I knew that any attempt to reach out to her had to come on her terms, not mine. In the meantime, I focused on trying to rebuild my own life, piece by piece. I started therapy, something I had never thought I needed before. It helped more than I ever expected. I talked through the anger, the frustration, the feelings of betrayal, and for the first time I didn't feel like I was carrying the entire weight of my decisions alone. I also began working on repairing my relationship with my colleagues. It wasn't easy and it didn't happen overnight, but slowly, people started to see the changes in me. They started to understand that I wasn't the same man who had blown up his life for the sake of revenge. The hardest part was accepting the truth. I couldn't change what had happened. I couldn't undo the mistakes I had made. But I could learn from them. I could do better. And maybe, just maybe, I could rebuild my life from the wreckage I had created. But there was still one final step in the process: letting go. I had to let go of the need for revenge. Let go of the desire to make Lily feel the same pain I had felt. I had to accept that, in the end, revenge hadn't solved anything. It hadn't brought me peace. It hadn't made me feel better about myself. All it had done was tear everything down. And as I sat in my empty apartment that night, staring out the window, I realized that I was finally ready to move on. It wasn't going to be easy and it wasn't going to happen overnight. But I was ready to start the journey of healing. And for the first time I felt like I had a chance to make things right. The days that followed felt like a blur, filled with moments of clarity and others of deep reflection. The healing process, if you could call it that, was slow. Every step forward was met with a shadow of the past, a reminder of the person I had been, the choices I had made, and the destruction that followed. But with time, the noise began to fade and I started to realize something important. I had to start living for myself, not for the revenge or the guilt that had driven me all this time. I was no longer the man I was when I first started this journey. The man who was fueled by anger, by the need to punish someone else for his pain, had died along with my marriage, my career, and the facade of control I thought I had. But now there was a chance for something different. It wasn't going to be easy, but it was possible. The first change I made was small. I stopped checking the website. The temptation to revisit it, to see what people were saying about me and Lily, had been strong at first. But I realized it was only feeding the cycle of regret and self-loathing. I had done what I had done, and no amount of checking or obsessing would make it better. It would only keep me trapped in the past. I stopped drinking so much. The alcohol had been my escape, my way of numbing the pain. But it was also keeping me from facing the truth. I had to face what I had done, not run away from it. I began to take better care of myself, physically, emotionally, and mentally. I exercised, I ate better, and I continued therapy. Slowly, I started to feel like the man I once was, or at least a version of him that was better, healthier, and stronger. I didn't expect forgiveness from Lily. I didn't think we would ever get back together. But that didn't mean I couldn't do something to redeem myself, even if that meant living the rest of my life without her. I started volunteering, helping people who had gone through similar experiences, people who had lost themselves in their anger, their pain. And in helping them, I found a part of myself that I thought was lost forever. A part of me that cared, that wanted to make a difference. Over time, things began to shift. It wasn't fast and it wasn't easy, but I could see the changes. I started to reconnect with people from my past, people I had pushed away during my vengeful spiral. Slowly, they started to come back into my life. They understood that I had made mistakes, but they saw the man I was becoming. It was a slow rebuild, brick by brick, but it was happening. One day, months after everything had gone down, I received an unexpected call. It was from Lily. I could hear the hesitation in her voice as she asked if we could meet. I wasn't sure what to expect. Maybe it was to finalize things. Maybe it was to argue. But when we met, all I could feel was the weight of everything between us. The anger, the hurt, the betrayal, it was still there, but it wasn't the only thing. There was something else. A small glimmer of understanding, a silent recognition that we both had been wrong, that we had both made choices that had hurt the other. We didn't reconcile. We didn't get back together. But we did talk. For the first time in a long time, we talked honestly, without the anger, without the hurt. It was the closure I didn't know I needed. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Lily and I parted ways that day, but it wasn't in bitterness. It was in a quiet understanding that we had both moved on, in our own ways, and that was okay. We had hurt each other, but we had also learned something valuable. And for the first time, I felt at peace with it. I knew that I would never be the same person again. But I was okay with that. The man who sought revenge, who destroyed his own life for the sake of vengeance, was gone. In his place was a man who understood that true strength wasn't in punishing others. It was in finding the courage to forgive, not just the ones who hurt you but yourself. The road ahead was still uncertain. But for the first time in a long while, I felt like I had the power to move forward. And that was enough.